The High Republic. This was supposed to be the era that was supposed to save Star Wars comics, but then lost the plot. Lucasfilm rolled out the High Republic like it was launching a new cinematic universe, brand new Jedi, brand new timeline, coordinated comics, novels, animation plans, even a launch livestream. For a second, it looked like Star Wars was about to reinvent itself for a new generation. But instead of a galactic rebirth, readers got a bloated, lore-heavy experiment that never fully connected. The timeline was set 200 years before the Phantom Menace, long before the Skywalkers, the Empire, or the Clone Wars. The Jedi were in their prime. Peace ruled the galaxy, which meant for many readers there was no real tension. The central villains, the Nihil and the Drengir, were introduced as chaotic marauders and carnivorous plant monsters, respectively. Neither stuck the landing. Fans found them visually bizarre, underwritten, or just flat-out unthreatening. But the real issue was the pacing. The main comic series, written by K. Van Scott, often spent entire issues bouncing between Jedi debates and vague Force visions while galaxy-threatening events were buried in exposition. Major characters like Keeve Trennis and Skier had potential, but were often lost under layers of dialogue or constantly shifting crossovers. Readers had to juggle events from novels, junior books, and multiple comic lines just to follow the plot. And then came Phase 2, a confusing time jump 150 years earlier. Fans who had finally adjusted were thrown back again into another cast, another crisis, and a new set of Jedi that still weren't the ones people had grown up with. Engagement dropped, sales slipped. Even major YouTubers who praised the launch stopped covering it consistently. Lucasfilm had promised the next great Star Wars epic. What it delivered was a timeline with ambition and lore, but not enough emotional anchors to keep comic fans invested. Dr. Aphra. When Dr. Aphra first showed up in Darth Vader, 2015, fans were sold. She was sharp, unpredictable, carried murderous droids, and somehow survived being on Vader's payroll. So when she got her own solo title, expectations were high. She was supposed to be Star Wars' breakout anti-hero, a chaotic force in the gray area between Jedi and Sith. Instead, the comic stretched itself across years, reboots, and personality overhauls that left readers wondering what they were still sticking around for. The original run by Kieran Gillen kicked things off strong. Aphra schemed, betrayed, double-crossed, all while dodging bounty hunters, Jedi artifacts, and her own ex. But as the series progressed and relaunched, the tone began to wobble. The relaunch in 2020 under Alyssa Wong kept her pansexual identity front and center, but drifted into overwritten inner monologues, vague Force relic arcs, and dialogue that often felt like someone narrating their own Tumblr blog in real time. By 2022, critics were still praising the diversity, but fans were less generous. Aphra stopped evolving and started circling. She'd bounce between regretful loner, flirty rogue, reckless genius, and emotionally unavailable disaster, all in one issue. That kind of chaos works in bursts, but over dozens of issues, it wore thin. The structure didn't help either. Each arc introduced ancient tech or a mystical MacGuffin with galaxy-ending potential, but none of it stuck. The stakes reset every few months, and the supporting cast rotated so often, emotional payoffs never landed. The longer it went, the more the series felt like it was trying to be clever instead of compelling. Star Wars, Princess Leia. When Marvel got the Star Wars license back in 2015, they launched with a bang. An all-new Princess Leia miniseries set right after the Death Star blew. It was supposed to show Leia processing Alderaan's destruction and stepping into leadership. But 5 issues later, fans weren't talking about emotional depth. They were asking why the book felt so robotic. The series, written by Mark Waid and drawn by Terry Dodson, kicked off with Leia trying to honor her people by tracking down scattered survivors of Alderaan. It had promise, a royal on a rescue mission. But from the start, the dialogue clashed with the stakes. Leia delivered her lines like a government memo in space. Her grief never landed. Her passion felt muted. And the dynamic with her sidekick, Yvonne, didn't build into anything memorable. The art was polished but strange. Dodson's style gave Leia a kind of permanent smirk, even in scenes that called for vulnerability. Readers kept pointing out how scenes meant to be tense or tragic looked like panels from a fashion magazine. The emotional disconnect grew with every page. Fans were also confused by the book's tone. One issue has Leia trading blaster fire in dresses, another has her floating through character development that doesn't match anything in the original trilogy. There's no real arc, and just a checklist of things Leia should care about, without giving her time to actually feel anything. She jumps from action to action without ever slowing down. Sales were strong at launch, but dipped sharply by the 3rd issue. Critics gave it polite praise. Fans were blunt. It felt like a rushed attempt to spotlight Leia without taking the time to understand what made her iconic. In the end, the series didn't add to her legacy, it just left readers flipping through, hoping for something with more weight. Star Wars Sana Starros. When Marvel gave Sana Starros her own solo series in 2023, the reaction was confusion. This was a character introduced back in 2015 as part of a bait-and-switch where she claimed to be Han Solo's wife. That fake-out gave her some buzz, but after years of bouncing around the background in various titles, she suddenly got top billing. No build-up, no big arc. Just 5 issues of a character struggling to justify her own spotlight. The comic focused on Sana reuniting with her dysfunctional family, including her cousin and grandmother, while getting wrapped up in a criminal mess involving a heist gone wrong. That setup could have worked if it had any tension. Instead, the story meandered. There was no urgency, no real hook to pull readers in. Most of the plot felt like filler, and the action sequences had no stakes. Reviews quickly pointed out the dialogue as a major issue. Characters explained everything out loud. Conversations dragged. Sana herself never established a clear voice. One moment confident, the next unsure, then suddenly commanding again. The tone swerved between dramatic family soap opera and shallow space crime adventure. The art by Per Perez was clean but did little to elevate the scenes. It was just flat. Panels that should have popped with energy were stiff, and big emotional beats came and went without impact. The book didn't chart high, and it wrapped after one arc with no continuation announced. Most fans barely noticed it ended. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. This one was Marvel's tie-in to Disney's $1 billion Star Wars theme park, and it read exactly like what it was, a marketing pitch in comic form. Every panel screamed synergy, every location felt like a branded map, and fans knew exactly what they were being sold. The 5-issue mini was centered around Doc Ondar, the shady antiques dealer featured in the Galaxy's Edge Park. He sent various characters on quests to retrieve relics for his collection, which just so happened to match the same ones you could find in Disney's gift shops. One story featured Greedo, another had Han and Chewie. Boba Fett made a quick appearance, but the cameos had zero weight. They were pulled in and out like action figures. No setup, no payoff, no connection to anything meaningful in canon. Writers Ethan Sachs and Will Sliney did what they could with the assignment, but the whole thing was boxed in. The stakes were non-existent. The dialogue was overloaded with name drops from the theme park. Black Spire Outpost, Onaka Transport Solutions, Ronto Roasters. If you'd never been to the park, it sounded like gibberish. If you had, it just reminded you that you'd already overpaid for blue milk. Critics gave it polite nods for world building. Readers didn't care. Most fans skipped it entirely or stopped after issue 1. Lando, Double or Nothing. Marvel greenlit Lando, Double or Nothing to ride the hype of Solo, a Star Wars story. With Donald Glover's Lando stealing scenes on screen, the idea was to give that version of the character his own comic adventure. Cool idea, until readers opened the first issue and realized the vibe was all surface, no spark. The 5-issue mini had Lando escorting a droid revolutionist into Imperial-controlled space. Sounds decent, but instead of high-stakes espionage or smooth-talking gambits, the plot drifted between aimless conversations and clunky action beats. The mission never felt urgent. The antagonist had no real presence. And by the final issue, the whole thing wrapped up like a forgotten side quest with barely any impact. Writer Rodney Barnes leaned hard into Lando's charisma, which should have worked, but nearly every line of dialogue sounded like an audition reel. Lando spoke in constant self-praise. At one point, he literally narrates how good he looks while dodging gunfire. After 3 pages, it stops being fun and starts reading like a parody of the character's confidence. The art by Paolo Villanelli had style, especially in the ships and settings, but the visual energy couldn't save scenes where the plot stood still. Whole issues passed without anything meaningful happening, no big twist, no real emotional arc. Lando starts the comic cool and ends cool. No change, no risk, no payoff. Critics gave the series lukewarm reviews, pointing to the flashy dialogue and thin story. Fans were less forgiving. Online forums called it empty fan service and forgettable. It never cracked strong sales numbers and no follow-up was announced. Star Wars Bounty Hunters Tonga Arc. When Marvel launched Star Wars Bounty Hunters, it was pitched as a hard-edged title, a place for guns for hire, double crosses, and everything too brutal for the mainline Star Wars. Books, and for a while, it delivered. The early arcs focused on Valance, a cyborg ex-Imperial with a chip on his shoulder and a kill list to match. But in 2021, the spotlight shifted, and fans started checking out. Enter Tonga, a former rebel turned bounty hunter. Her arc was meant to evolve the series, expand representation, and give readers a new leader to rally behind. Instead, the pacing collapsed, the tone softened, and the bounty hunters turned into a team-building exercise. Tonga's crew, a diverse group of mostly original characters, had potential, but their introduction felt forced. Each new member got a dramatic entrance, a quick backstory, and then barely anything to do. The dialogue got bogged down in exposition, with long stretches of characters explaining their motivations rather than showing them. Action scenes still happened, but the stakes never felt sharp. Blaster fights came and went without consequences. By mid-2022, fan forums started calling out the tonal shift. What used to feel like Star Wars, The Mandalorian meets Dirty Dozen, had started reading like Guardians of the Galaxy, Team Orientation Week. The Tonga storyline dragged across multiple issues with no real payoff. Even Valance, once the heart of the series, got sidelined into filler arcs and awkward cameos. Critics stayed quiet. Most outlets barely covered the later issues. The book kept publishing, but pull list interest faded. Star Wars: Women of the Galaxy. When it dropped, the comic was billed as a celebration of Star Wars' most iconic female characters, from Leia and Rey to Ahsoka, Ventress, and Mon Mothma. The hardcover featured striking portraits by over a dozen artists, each paired with a short write-up by Amy Ratcliffe. Visually, gorgeous, structurally, more of an illustrated pamphlet than an actual narrative. The book contains over 70 character entries. Each one spans about a page and includes a short bio, a few traits, and some inspirational phrasing. That's it. There are no storylines, no arcs, and no conflict. It reads like it was designed for middle school library shelves. Safe, sanitized, and formatted like a Star Wars-themed LinkedIn profile. Fans looking for new insights or deep dives into these women's impact on the galaxy left empty-handed. The writing is clean and earnest, but repetition creeps in fast. Every entry focuses on resilience, leadership, or compassion, with little variety in tone. There's no grit, no internal flaws, no real exploration of what made these characters unique beyond their gender and loyalty. Even morally complex figures like Ventress or Aura Singh get flattened into footnotes. Online reactions were split. Some praised the representation and the focus on inclusivity. Others pointed out how characters like Kira, Hera Syndulla, or Jyn Erso were reduced to hollow descriptions. For many fans, the book felt like an art collection glued to a press release. The beautiful illustrations by artists like Jen Bartel and Sarah Alfaghi were the main draw, and even those got more traction on social media than in the book itself. And that's it. These are the comics that we got. But now to you, which comic lost you the fastest? Or which one still deserves a second chance? Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.